Hello, welcome back to my channel. This is part two in a series that I'm doing called The Grand Story of the Bible. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at all the big narratives, all the big themes from the Bible that connect Genesis, run through the Bible to Revelation, and showing how this is one grand story. I think it's a true story. But showing how everything's connected, um, different major themes. So this is the second part. So if you haven't watched the first part, go back and watch the first part, which I'm covering creation. This second part, I'm covering the fall of man. Uh, and so we've heard the stories. To kind of summarize where we are here, God has created the world. He's made man, mankind. That is the top of his creation. He makes man and he places man in a garden, and the garden is it's a temple-like structure. There's debates among Bible scholars as to whether it's a temple or whether the temple is a reflection of creation. Either way, you have is holy space where mankind is a priest. Adam and Eve were priests, and their job was to tend the garden. They were supposed to Edenize the earth. And in Genesis 3, we have kind of a new character, so to speak. Satan comes on the scene. So now there's another being involved here. And it doesn't really tell us about this. It doesn't really even call him Satan. We know that he's Satan more because of things that are said in the book of Revelation and than anything that's said in the Old Testament. But, here it calls him the serpent. And it says Adam and Eve are allowed to eat anything they want in the garden except for the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. S- So this is kind of a weird thing. Like, they're allowed, imagine going into a banquet and you're a guest, and the owner of the banquet, the person that's hosting everything, it's his house. He has like 50 tables, just all kinds of food just piled up. And so he comes in and he's welcomes you, and there's other people at the party who welcomes you, and he says, "Hey, you can eat off food off of any table you want except this one table." And that's the table you decide to eat from. That's kind of what Adam and Eve did. If you were the host there at that party, you wouldn't be too happy with your guests, mm, especially if that food was specially prepared for something. So, in here, this story, the tree in question is called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And God tells them not to eat from the tree. The day you eat of it, you will be um, you will die. That's it. The day you eat of it, you will die. And so Adam and Eve are going along. They're doing what they're supposed to do. It doesn't really tell us how much time has lapsed since God gave the command. And the serpent appears. And when the serpent appears, um, he comes in. He comes to Eve first, and you have to remember, God gives the command to Adam, and then he creates Eve out of Adam, and then he puts both of them in charge of the garden, which basically means both of them in charge of the planet. And then he would leave, and it tells us that he would come back and walk in the cool of the day. So the serpent appears. Now, ancient people, they didn't know a lot of have a lot of the technology that we have. They didn't know a lot of the scientific facts. Some of their ideas seem kind of silly to us moderns. The idea that vipers would eat their way out. There were some Jews that believed that. Different things like that. But they weren't dumb. They knew that snakes couldn't talk, which tells us that there's something different about this snake. And the Hebrew word here, from the research that I've done, has it's written in a way that it kind of has a double meaning. So it means serpent. It also could be referencing a shining one, which would be an angel or a kind of a lesser deity, a little g god, if you will. Or it could be referencing kind of a tester. Like later on, they had the office of the serpent, and the accuser. And in the ancient world, what this accuser's job was any type of case or any type of decision that was being made between the king and his advisors. His job was to oppose it. His job was to come up and bring in, oh, what about this? What about that? What if this happens? We can't do that because this will happen. His job is to actually argue against whatever ideas are being brought before the king. And the service for that is that the king gets to helps the king make decisions, basically, because he has someone that's trying to poke ideas and the things brought before him. So it could refer to that. But really what I think here is we have an appearance of the capital S Satan. And as I said before, I believe that because that's what we find in the book of Revelation. But here it doesn't tell us that here. And so the serpent comes up and speaks to them. And as I said, they know animals don't talk. They're not dumb. They just don't have technology. They probably believe things differently, but just because they believe things differently doesn't mean they're dumb. And um, so that when the Satan appears, he tempts Eve. So this is like Genesis chapter 3. And he tempts Eve, and he starts off and he says, did God really say that you can't eat out of any tree in the garden? And where's Adam? I don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us if he's standing there watching that or if he's walking somewhere else in the garden. But he's talking to Eve and he says, did God really say that you can't touch that fruit? Which God didn't say they couldn't touch that fruit. Did Actually, he says you can't eat that fruit. And Eve says, no, we can't eat of it. We can't even touch it. And God didn't say that. God said they couldn't eat of it. So Eve is telling we can't touch it. And then, being tricky, the serpent says, look at the fruit. It's good to eat. And God knows that if you eat it, you will become like us. You'll become a God, basically. You'll become a little g God. You will become a divine being. It'll give you the grand wisdom of what there is to know. And so Eve eats the fruit. And then she goes and tells Adam and has Adam eat the fruit. So let's take a look at this serpent there, Satan. Um, Brian J. Walsh and J. Richard Middleton, they're looking at this and they tell us that since Satan has no legitimate realm or creation of his own to rule, he lives off God's rule. His domain consists of attempting to distort God's good creation. So that's kind of talking about Satan, and this is the book, The Transforming Vision, Shaping a Christian Worldview. That's the book if you guys want to go in and check out that book. And so Satan has no realm of his own. Satan is supposed to be, it doesn't really tell us his origin here. So later on, we find out in the New Testament that Satan is God's enemy. He's coming in here. He's attacking this. And evil, we know evil doesn't begin with human beings. We're not told that here, but this is something that will help us understand what is going on. Evil doesn't begin with human beings. Evil begins with the rebellion in the angelic realms. The little g gods, the angels. There's a group of angels that want power for themselves, and so they rebel and they get kicked out. And we can see things from this. It talks about it in the New Testament, talks about it in some of the prophets, Daniel and Ezekiel, more Ezekiel than Daniel. We find it specifically, yeah, in Ezekiel and Isaiah, and this is Ezekiel 28 verses 12 through 17, and Isaiah chapter 14 verses 12 through 14. And it's a bit tricky. Some Bible scholars don't like using this to talk about the fall of the real Satan, the Satan that you find in the New Testament. And I think they're wrong. In each of those, what you have is a comparison of a city that's being punished. And as the city is being punished, Tyre's one of them. And as the city's being punished, it describes the city falling like Satan. So it's drawing a comparison. So for this comparison to work, whatever's true of the city has to be true of Satan. Otherwise, it would be kind of weird to say, oh, like the yeah, like the fall of the angel Michael, but Michael never fell from heaven. So what kind of a comparison is that? Doesn't really work unless Satan has some kind of fall. But it doesn't really give us any details either. And it also talks about Satan trying to take God's power. So we know that Satan is he's rebelling, and in this act going to Adam and Eve to tempt them is part of this rebellion. So Eve goes to Adam. Adam eats the fruit. And then God used to come down and spend time there. It says he walked with them in the cool of the evening. We don't know exactly what that looks like. We do know that this is something personal. This is a personal type relationship that's going on with this. So God is walking with them in the cool of the evening, and as they're going along, walking in the cool of the evening, this time when they hear God coming, they hide. They realize they're naked. The fruit has kind of opened their eyes. They realize they're naked. They knew that God forbid them to eat the fruit. And so now they're hiding. But you can't really hide from God. God knows all things. So it doesn't really make sense to hide from God, but that's what they do. And when God comes calling for them and they say, oh, here we are. Why are you hiding? Oh, we knew that we were naked. God says, how did you know you were naked? And Adam and Eve respond. Um, Adam kind of throws Eve under the bus. This woman that you gave me, she gave me fruit and I ate. It's her fault. Arrest her. So Adam kind of shirks responsibility, even though he ate of the fruit freely and he knew God commanded it. So I don't really know. Adam's trying to kind of get out of his responsibility here. And so, like, he points the finger, but it doesn't get him out of the situation he's in. He still ate the fruit. So God then turns to the woman and says, how, Eve, how is it that you ate this fruit? Basically asks her, Eve, what did you do? And Eve tells her, the serpent. The serpent um, tricked me into eating the fruit. And so God ends up putting a curse on Adam, a curse on Eve, and a curse on the fruit. And we've kind of moved from this kind of creation covenant, this creation mandate, into a different kind of situation. So it says, this is in Genesis 3, starting with verse 14. It says, the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock, above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So this is a punishment of Satan, and it is still treating Satan like a snake, in the way it talks about him crawling on the belly, on his belly. But then you get this thing. So there's enmity between the offspring of the woman, and the offspring of Satan. So who would this offspring of Satan be? Well, the Bible tells us a little bit about that, but you're going to have to wait for a different video for me to address that. Um, but what we can find is that there's going to be one that comes from Eve that will crush the head of the serpent. And so it's a promise. It's a promise of someone that will come and make things right. And this person that's going to come to make things right, he will bruise his heel. So there will be he will conquer Satan, he will destroy Satan, but he'll get hurt in the process. Is basically the image that's going on here. Then it says, to the woman he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing, and in pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. So this "he shall rule over you" is a bit of controversy. I'm not really. Um, some scholars say that's women having to submit to men, in which case, man being uh, the head of things and women being a secondary status would be a result of the fall, not even really more of a consequence than a punishment. Um, so you come in, and now there's going to be, I think this is the real takeaway. Now there's going to be conflict and tension between men and women. And we find that when we look at society, we always have. In the history of that, women have often been looked down upon by men. Even in today's society, women are can be looked down upon by men. But I don't think this is really giving like that permission to that. It's saying this is the more saying this is what will happen. Be kind of like telling a kid you sped and now you get a ticket. Uh, would be something like that. Not even that. Like you drove over this barrier and now your tire's flat. Might even look at it more that way. And to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat it all, and uh, eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. And by the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, and for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So it says Adam was made out of the dust of the ground, is kind of what this is implying. This is where that comes from. So because Adam rebelled against God, Adam didn't even, you know, voluntarily step up to try and take credit for it in this. But because he does that, because he was the one that received the command, and even if he didn't, he knew what the command was, and yet he followed Eve anyways and ate the fruit. So his punishment is he has to work the land, and it's going to be hard, laborious work. You're going to sweat, your muscles are going to hurt, things are going to be heavy, you're going to have to push things around. It's that type of situation that we're looking at here. And so we get that as what's going on here. Um, and so there's this enmity. And when we're looking at that, a New Testament scholar, N.T. Wright, he's looking at this and he says, The primal sin of humanity consisted in putting the knowledge of good and evil before the knowledge of God. So the real sin here isn't so much eating the fruit as much as it is trying to grab the knowledge in a way that God was not permitting, trying to grab a knowledge in a way that was coming under their own authority, trying to raise themselves up in the way that they did it. Uh, so it's instead of seeking after God, they went and were seeking after this knowledge. So that's the primary thing. And then we have Daniel Block, Old Testament scholar. He says, obviously, God had not completely abandoned either his vice regents, that'd be Adam and Eve, or his world. Nevertheless, the relationship of trust between the suzerain, the ultimate ruler, and his creation, between the suzerain and a viceroy, that's your local ruler. Suzerain, you can think of, particularly in the time of history of the New Testament, the suzerain would be like the emperor in Rome, and the viceroy would be like the local king, King Herod. So, and between the man and the woman, and between the viceroy and the kingdom, were all severed. All those connections were severed with this sin. And so now the people are separated from God. And the garden was the connection. The garden was the connection between the earth and the heavens, between earth and God. And Adam and Eve sin by taking that fruit. And the result of that sin is that now that connection between God and creation, between God and humanity, between man and woman, between humanity and creation, all that has been severed. Um, so you're in a situation, relationships have been broken. Adam and Eve are kicked in the garden, and they were told, pain and childbearing for Eve and conflict with her husband. Adam now has to sweat and work hard and get sore muscles and all of that. And they're out of the ground. Relationships are broken. And right here's where I'm going to stop this video because we're going to do 3 more parts that are coming. And we're going to stop here so that the video doesn't run too long. So what's coming up, just a little teaser. What's coming up is going to be, we're going to look at Cain and Abel, and then we're going to look at the flood, and we're going to look at the Tower of Babel. So we got these 3 things coming up, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments, be sure to comment down below. I will get back to you. If you have any questions or suggestions, maybe I can make other videos answering different questions that are asked. And thank you for coming to my channel, and have a great day.